Picture a guy walking across a parking lot on an ordinary morning with a coffee in his hand and not a thing on his mind. There's nothing unusual going on around him, just somebody unloading groceries, a woman on her phone, and a few crows in the trees minding their own business. But the moment he walks past those trees, the crows swarm him with a war cry and dive bomb so fast that he actually flinches. And the strange part is, they leave everybody else alone. They just want him. Now you'd be surprised, but this is an actual phenomenon. And the people who studied this noticed something they couldn't quite explain. When they counted the crows declaring war on this dude, most of them had never even met him. They weren't the ones he'd crossed, never chased by him, never seen him do a single thing, and yet every bird in that mob knew his face, and every one of them had already decided this guy was the enemy. So how the heck does a crow carry a grudge against a face it's never seen? The answer's a lot stranger than just having a good memory, and buried in this story is one detail that shouldn't be possible. To figure this out, a wildlife biologist in Seattle built a test around one simple question. Do crows really tell humans apart by face, or are they just reading our clothes, our height, the way we walk, or something else entirely? So he did something that sounds a little ridiculous. He put on a rubber mask that looked like a cheap caveman face and wore it while he trapped a small group of wild crows on a university campus. Trapping doesn't hurt them, but the birds hate it, and they don't forget it. Then, to be sure the face was the only thing that mattered, he had other people walk the same paths in a different mask without bothering a single bird. And this is where it gets fascinating. The caveman face got screamed at. The other faces got nothing. The only difference was the mask. So far, this is just a good memory. You wrong them, they remember you. Fair enough. Then the part that didn't fit started to show up. See, he'd only ever trapped 7 of those crows. But when he came back years later and walked that same campus in that same caveman mask, he got mobbed by 47 crows out of the 53 he passed. You think a grudge like that would fade, or at least only stay with the 7 who lived it, but it did the opposite. The grudge multiplied into the bird mafia and spread to crows more than a kilometer from where any trapping ever happened, which means that memory wasn't living inside any single bird. Somehow, it was moving crow to crow, like the whole campus had been briefed on a guy most of them had never met. This makes you wonder why crows would even bother keeping track of us in the first place. Crows living in a city share their whole world with the most dangerous and most useful creature they will ever deal with, which is us, humans. The trouble for them is that we don't come labeled as dangerous or useful. One person refills a bird feeder every morning and appears to be friendly, but another throws rocks, chases, and traps. From a branch 50 feet up, those 2 humans can look identical. So crows that lump us all into one blurry group lose either way. If they put all of us humans in the useful and friendly group, then they risk trusting the wrong face and getting hurt. But if they get all paranoid and decide every face is a threat, then they spend their whole day fleeing people who are never going to bother them. The way out of that trap is to recognize the one face that actually means harm. Once they do that, they can relax around everybody else and spend their fear only on the humans who earned it. So telling us apart isn't a parlor trick. They do it for survival, which is pretty genius considering their brain is the size of a walnut. It also explains why crows remember faces, but what it doesn't explain is the thing from the campus. How do the other birds come to fear a face they've never seen? But before we figure out how a face spreads to birds that never saw it, we've got to be sure it really is the face they're locking onto in the first place. And the researchers pushed this about as far as it could go. They flipped the dangerous mask upside down and the crows still scolded it. They would tilt their heads sideways to keep the face lined up. Then researchers put the mask under a hat and the crows mobbed it anyway. And even when they tried to camouflage it in a crowd of strangers, the crows still pinpointed it. The crow invasion only stopped once the mask was swapped for a different one. And that, my friends, is how we can confidently know that it wasn't the jacket or the walk or some distinct Gucci cologne. But to be extra sure, the researchers ran the crows through a brain scan. And when a crow looked at a face it feared, the fear and vision parts of the brain both lit up together. And what's super legit is that it's the same rough wiring that fires in you when you spot someone you don't trust across a room. Pretty crazy, right? It is. But we still need an explanation for the other 40 birds who weren't actually there but still recognized the face. Every one of those 40 crows came to hate a man they'd never once met, because a grudge in a flock of crows is contagious. You see, when those 7 trapped birds started screaming, every crow within earshot snapped around to see what the panic was about. And in that instant, they didn't just hear the alarm. They caught the face behind the panic and burned it in, without anyone ever laying a hand on them. So the initial crows actually became teachers. Every bird that mobbed beside them flew off carrying that same face, then passed it to the next crows, and the next, until one rubber mask had rippled across the entire campus, a single face moving through an invisible bird network. But there's still one more part to this whole thing that's even stranger. This grudge kept going for years, long after those original 7 were gone, and it reached crows that weren't even alive when any of it happened. Which sounds insane until you realize people do this constantly. Someone can pick up a reputation in a small town long before half the town's ever met him. Your friendly neighborhood Karen will ask to speak to your manager because there was a hair in her food, and you end up getting blamed even if you weren't the cook. Now you're known as that troublesome person behind the cash register. And crows pull off the same trick. They just do it without a single word. The crows that learned to hate that face didn't take the grudge to their graves. They handed it down to their kids like a family heirloom, which is why the memory never really lived inside any single bird. It lived in the whole flock, passed down from one generation to the next, and reinforced every time that face turned up again. Crow parents show their young the face is worth fearing, the same way they show them where the food is and which rooftops are safe. So a chick that never saw the initial trapping event grows up already knowing the enemy and inheriting the grudge like it was hard-coded in their DNA. You see, the researchers kept walking that campus in the same mask for 17 years, but a crow only lives for about 8 years. So the grudge didn't just outlast the trapping event, it outlasted the birds. The crows still screaming at the face years later were a brand new generation, never trapped, never there, and not even alive when it happened. They simply acted on a grudge they didn't even know they were going to inherit. So if a crow can hold on to a face for years and hand it to the birds that never even saw it, what do you think the flock on your block has already filed away about you? Let that marinate for a bit. And the next time a crow screams at one guy in a parking lot while ignoring everyone else, take a good look. The Crow Mafia might have just put a contract out on that guy, if you catch my drift. Maybe you're watching a face get recognized in real time, or maybe it's a grudge older than the bird carrying it, still making the rounds like it happened yesterday.